so much for coming this afternoon and listening to us. My name is Butch Helton. If you don't know me, I used to work here for the city for 23 years and worked on Wilderness Wildlife Week. So I'm going to make all the mandatory announcements that need to be made, and I can assure you this program will end on time. Out of respect to whoever may be following us, we do not like people who go over their allotted time. We don't like those folks. But if you do have your cell phone with you, please turn it off, put it on silent, please, so it won't interfere. And we want to thank the city of Pigeon Forge for sponsoring this event, putting it on. And the other great, they have some other sponsors outside, but it is primarily sponsored by the city of Pigeon Forge. We want to thank all the good folks with the city for doing this every year, totally free here, and we appreciate that very much. So we have our panel with us this year, and everybody's here. Nobody got fell down or got hurt. Well, they have. But, and Jackie is down there now. She's not being ostracized or she's not in timeout or anything like that. But she's
not yet.
Not yet. She's having a few mobility issues, so she doesn't want to give her little scooter up there. So hopefully she'll behave herself. But we also have Miss Harriet Berrier. I've known Harriet since the fall of 1961. She and I were first grade students in Miss Reba Hood's first grade class right up here on the hill. That way, I guess it's over that way. But known her for a long time. Next to her is Bill Bradley. I've known Bill forever too. I guess since about that time, or a little bit later on, I had was in a few grades with him. Down on the end there is Randy Starkey, and I've known Randy for a long time. Randy is the kid. He's a year younger than the three of us. He was a year behind us.
And I look it too. That's
Life has been better than you.
And down there, as I mentioned, is Miss Jackie, who is with, and I've known Jackie
First grade,
first grade, and sixth grade. And we've known one another for a long time. We've done this several times. We talked about the 60s last year. We thought we would bump it on up into the 70s this year and get some of the things that we talk about. And remember, there are two things I'll touch on before we get started here that really impacted Pigeon Forge in the 60s. On March 15, 1961, City Manager Dan Connor announced that they had hired Miss Earlene Keister to serve as the city clerk for the city of Pigeon Forge. And Miss Earlene is right up the hill there now, and she still works for the city of Pigeon Forge to this day. She's now our city manager and has been for some time. But she is a wonderful, wonderful lady, does a great job. She's been our city manager since 1982, but she has been employed by the city of Pigeon Forge since 1961. That's incredible. Anybody stayed at the job that long. The other thing that happened in the 60s that formed Pigeon Forge, more so as we know it now, is in 1967, Pigeon Forge went to a 5-person city council. They had been a 3-person city council prior to that. They still, their mayor is not elected outright. They elect the mayor amongst themselves, amongst the commissioners. That changed the way things are from 3 to 5. And it's still 5 to this day. It's a little different. They run more specific seats now, but they still have 5 members on the city council to do that. So the 1970 census tells us that 1,361 people lived in Pigeon Forge. Now keep in mind the city limits were a little tighter then. They didn't go down as far as they did. Now they go down to the bridge. They didn't go down to the bridge those days. They didn't go that far. And the most recent one in 2020 tells us that there were 6,343 people currently residing in Pigeon Forge. So that gives you an idea. It was still, even in the 70s, Pigeon Forge was still a pretty small town. It was growing, it was changing a lot. It was still a place that a lot of people has passed through on their way to Gatlinburg, but there were a lot of things here, and it did start to change. The tourism industry moved in and developed more, and those things started, and we'll talk about a little bit of that stuff later on, but that's where it started to change. And it's more like the Pigeon Forge you see today. But in the 70s, it was still a very small town. I mean, everybody pretty much knew everybody, you know. And so it was a great place to live. And I think we'd all agree it's a great place to grow up, wouldn't it? Go to
Yep.
school.
Amen. It
Everything,
was.
Yeah, so let's start out in 1970. Something happened that year. Well, two things happened. One thing, the new City Hall building was under construction. We'll talk about that in a minute. But right over here on the Parkway, where the book warehouse is now, the Big Inn opened up. The Big Inn, yes. The Big Inn was our version of Walmart back in those days. There was really not much of a place here in Pigeon Forge to go shopping. Sue's Fashion was more for ladies, obviously. And there weren't a whole lot of places you could get clothing. But it opened up in 1970 and stayed there until 1986. Probably what spelled the end for it was in 1981 they got a Kmart in Sevierville, and in 1983 they got a Walmart in Sevierville. So I guess the Big Inn saw it writing on the wall. But it was a great place to shop. Everybody went there. They could drive
Yeah,
goods,
a
little bit of everything. And
They always had, did they have ducks and chickens at extra Wendy's, or was that,
I don't know. I don't remember. They could have.
or was that? Maybe in Sevierville, I
that
don't know.
might have
We
been
always got those in Sevierville.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I don't remember.
But they had a little bit of
I
everything.
think I bought fish there. Did we buy fish there, Harriet? I
Could
thought
have. But I mean, they sold clothing, they
Yeah.
sold everything, they
kids'
sold a little bit
clothes,
of
you get
everything.
it there.
And it was where, it was a big deal, really, when it opened up. There was nothing like that around here. Did you? I guess the biggest thing I remember when you first went in there, back in the corner, was where all their records were. They had all their records back there, and that's where I bought a lot of my vinyl at and everything. There's still over 300 albums and vinyls making a comeback now. So hang on to those old records, folks. They're still good. What about you guys? Any thoughts on the Big Inn, Bill or Randy?
I wasn't allowed in there, so I don't know. I was banned from the Big Inn.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wasn't shoplifting or nothing, was it?
Well, we can't go into that right now. I remember being down there. I went down there and bought model cars, things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And I think the Ayers family,
Yeah,
they
they did.
they had the dime stores as well, too,
In downtown.
in downtown. But the Ayers family owned that. Bill, did you ever?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Is his name Wayne?
Wayne,
Yeah,
yeah.
Wayne.
Wayne
Yeah, Wayne
He's
Ayers.
his dad.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Wayne's the son.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember the Big Inn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a great place to shop, and there
Yeah.
really, again, there wasn't nothing much like that in Pigeon Forge then. If you went to Butler's store, they had the overalls, and stuff, but that was
Butler
about it.
store was the biggest.
Yeah, it still is, isn't it? It still is.
Well, it's still kind of,
So, well, it's a little different now, but yeah. So that happened in 1970. And when that opened up, they were constructing the new City Hall building. And prior to that, City Hall was here locally, we all refer to it as the Paul Sims building. Paul and his family owned it. And if you're wondering where that's at, if you turn at the old mill red light here, and you're headed that way, those little shops that are up there, I think it's called a Taste of Tennessee or something. They sell ice cream or something in there. But in the 60s, from the time they incorporated till 1971, that was City Hall. And it was just a little old bitty building in there. And about the only person I ever remember sitting there much was Earlene. She worked in there. That's where you went to pay your water bill and stuff. And but in 1971, they moved up here next to the Big Inn on the Parkway, where the special events office is at now. And I know a little bit about that. I spent 22 years there. But when that first opened up, it was all of the city. Everything in the city was there. The city manager was there. The police department was there. The fire department was there. Everything was there in that one building. And it was remodeled several times over the year, but that was a big deal. I remember downstairs was the police department, which eventually became the mailroom when I worked there. It was the police department down there. And any thoughts about City Hall when it moved down there? It moved out of the Paul Sims building and moved down there on the Parkway.
I just remember that's where Sammy
Sammy Owenby.
Ownby shot
Yeah.
himself in the foot. down there in the basement.
I don't know if I don't know if we already talked about that or not.
Or
I like
just
that.
roll it away in
That's the only thing I remember about the old city hall.
They,
Where the fire department was on.
in the
Yeah,
fire department,
Yeah, it wasn't where
it,
all the sand was.
no, the fire department was there. It's where like the Jake Thomas Bridge is now. It's set out there, obviously the road wasn't through, the road didn't go there. And across the street there at Walgreens was, there was a campground there. Garfield Reagan and his family had a campground there. And across the street, the thing I remember a lot about was across the street from Jake Thomas's place, Jake Farm. But at one time he had like 5,000 hogs over there, and that place stunk. I mean, you could smell it a long time before you. I don't know how those poor people stayed at the campground put up with it. And there was Teaster Lane, which you come down now out through here, was Orbank Road, and they extended in the early '90s. And I think they finished it in '94. They extended it where it came all the way down through town, and that's when it became Teaster Lane. But to get to Jake's place in, of course, there was nothing down there. I mean, Jake, he raised farm. He was a farmer. And he raised tobacco. He raised had hogs mostly, you know. But he farmed, and there was a little dirt road, a little gravel road went down there, and it went down to the river, went down by the river. And Jake's house, he lived in a big white house. It set down about where the island is now, down in that general area right in there. It was right in there. And there was a small little trailer that set up there, and there was a guy that worked the place for Jake, that lived there and everything, you know. And really, when they built the thoroughfare, the bridge and everything through there, and ergo, that's why it's called Jake Thomas Road, but Jake gave them the land to do that. He struck a deal with the city. And part of the deal, as I understood it, was that they wouldn't incorporate him into the city. He didn't want to be in the city at that time, so he gave them that land. So that's what.
Well, that road just went down what they call Orbank.
Yes,
It just
was
went
Orbank
down to
Road.
about where you turn across in front of the convention center. right?
Yeah, right in there,
It
Yeah.
ended about right there, and then the
Yeah.
rest of that was Jake's farm.
Yeah.
And then you run into the LaFollette.
On the other side,
chicken house
yeah,
down
yeah.
down on the further end of Teacher
Yeah.
Lane.
On the end there where the Mountain Mile is now, the old mall used to be, that was, even during the '70s, that was the LaFollettes owned that land. That's where they kept their cattle. You know, they farmed too and had cattle there, and they lived next to it. A few people lived down in there then.
Yeah, the three,
Yeah,
there was 3 sets of LaFollettes lived. That old Gatlinburg Highway used to come at an angle up through there, and then went through their farms, and then cut back over towards the Parkway.
yeah. So
That's how it went there.
Yeah.
That road didn't go on through then.
Randy's down on the south end. He's up in Connor Heights. You didn't get down that way too much. did you?
I was in the high class end of town. I'll tell you something I do remember. My dad come home one evening, and down on this lower end, it was just all farmland, and he come in and he said, "Ma, they're selling land down there for $1,000 an acre." He said, "There ain't nothing but crazy people will pay that much for land. You can't buy 1 inch of it now for $1,000. Not 1 inch of land." And I remember them going on about that, and I just believed it. And I thought, my goodness, why didn't Daddy have $1,000 back then to buy us an acre of land? And I wouldn't be sitting here; I'd be sitting out there forking in the money right now. But
You've been counting.
just how things have changed
Yeah.
over time.
Right.
The way it was back then, it was one of the best places in the world to grow up. I remember as a child, we'd get out and run the roads, and the police went to bed at 5, and we just had it. But it wasn't like we done bad things, but we just got out and run around, just had a good time.
You could ride your bicycle anywhere.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah, you can ride your bike anywhere. Yeah.
We a bunch of us had motorcycles, and there was about 2 or 3 mediums in Pigeon Forge at the time. That's all there was, and we'd get out in the middle of it and ride and jump across one to the other, just see if we could make it all the way across. You know, the other side of the medium between the highways, and it's just the way we grew up. It was just a good time, a good place to be. And it's still a good place to be.
Still.
I'm still glad the Lord left me here. I'm glad to be here.
It was, and then too, everything closed pretty much at the end of October, so after that, the town was pretty much dead during the winter especially, you know, there wasn't a lot of activity.
All the motels. closed.
All the motels pretty much did.
And the gas station's closed at 7:30, so if you need any gas, you better get it before 7:30 or you wouldn't have any. So, just things like that.
Yeah, but land was, it's hard to believe when you see the prices they get for it now. I had a good friend, George Warsham, who was on the city council for a long time here in Pigeon Forge, and he told me a story of how right across from the Baptist church, right across from where Taco Bell is now, there used to be a gas station there. It was for years. Fred Wilson ran it and everything, you know. I didn't know George owned that land. And he told me he bought it in 1959 and he paid $8,000 for it. And he said everybody laughed at him and made fun of him and told him he was crazy and he'd never get his money back out of it and everything. Well, he held on to it, held on to it, held on to it. So when the corporation come in that bought to build Taco Bell and bought the land from him, they gave him $850,000 for it in the early 90s. And he said, I think I made a pretty good deal. So, you know, so it has changed tremendously, yes, it really has. It really has, yeah.
I remember back, of course, there were no taxis or anything in Pigeon Forge. The Newman brothers in Sevierville had a taxi, and in the 70s when I started driving, we'd go to town once a month maybe to Sevierville, and Mom let me drive one time, let me drive down there, and we got in Sevierville and locked the darn keys in the car. First time I'd ever drove down to town and get down there, we didn't know what to do. Nobody had a cell phone, Daddy wasn't home, couldn't get a hold of nobody. So we was going to get Newman's taxi, there's two brothers there, and they had hired this new guy. So we get in a taxi in Sevierville and ride up through Pigeon Forge and get up at the end toward Connor Heights where I live. Me and Mom sitting in the back seat and we got ready to turn. This guy, I don't know who he was from Louisiana, I believe. She just grabbed him on the shoulder and he screamed and we run in the ditch. And I was like, man, you know, I'd never been in a taxi, I didn't know what's going on. And so we all got out of the car and he said, you all right, you all right? She said, yeah. I said, what's wrong with you? What's going on? And he said, well, I tell you what, I worked in a funeral home for 30 years. And he said, I ain't never had nobody grab me from the back. Anyway.
Jackie, how about you?
Well, I just sit here thinking, this was in the 60s. There was one day we walked into Bill Yett's Tennessee history class.
Hey, I still know every
I saw
county
Bill
in
not
this-
long ago.
Absolutely. That was the
Yeah.
longest hour we ever had. Longer than Blanche McCall's Latin class. We walked in one day and he said that I never had forgotten this. Pigeon Forge, they had announced Pigeon Forge was the fastest growing city in America. But we come in and go, hey, do you know what's in front of so-and-so? What are they putting up? I don't know. And we'd all ask, does anybody know what such and such? No, I heard this, I heard that. That was going on a lot, you know, because we were growing so fast. But being the fastest growing city in the country stuck with me way more than where Jones County and McMahon County and all that stuff. That impacted me more.
It's hard to believe now that sleepy little Pigeon Forge is
I
we are the third most county anyway that sends tax dollars to Nashville behind Nashville and Davidson County, you know, in West Tennessee. So we still are that comes through here. So but in the 70s, the motel industry was still pretty quiet, pretty low key. We had a few. I remember. Does anybody remember what the first chain restaurant was here in Pigeon Forge?
Tasty. No.
Was it Burger King?
Remax.
Yeah, but Burger King.
Burger King.
In
Burger King,
Burger
but,
King.
my daddy and a couple of the other guys in Pigeon Forge, probably about that same time, right there where the train is at Dollywood, we turn to go to Dollywood, over there on the right-hand side, Dan Connor and some others, McAfee had
Yeah.
that piece of property.
Right.
They wanted to put a McDonald's on there. They went to see it's not Litton, what's the guy that had McDonald's in Knoxville?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, anyway, it's the one that had 3 or 4 different ones. And
Yeah.
he said that Pigeon Forge didn't have enough business to have a McDonald's. And they only had 2.
No, we have 2, yes
I
ma'am.
have 2, but I'm gonna throw in something that's a little earlier. And, that I've answered this question 1,000 times. And my dad was the golf pro at Gatlinburg. And people still to this day come up to me and said, how is the Gatlinburg golf course in Pigeon Forge?
In Pigeon Forge, yes.
The same way the
And
Pigeon
mine
Forge
is not
Gatlinburg
Pigeon
Airport is
Forge.
in
Yeah,
Sevierville.
yeah, yeah.
The same way the Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge
Airport
Airport
is
is
in
in
Sevierville,
Sevierville.
yeah, yeah.
Well, when we moved here in 1955, Daddy was the first pro. So the city of Gatlinburg owned it because they just bought a big piece of property and wanted to put it on there. And so as long as I can, it'll never be anything else. But it's the golf course in Pigeon Forge owned by the city of
Owned by the city of
Gatlinburg.
Gatlinburg.
It's because it was
Yeah.
not
We want to see.
incorporated.
Yeah.
And
Right.
they
Didn't
never,
matter.
and Pigeon
Yeah.
Forge never wanted it.
Pigeon Forge was in the
Right.
county then, so yeah.
Yeah, and so
yeah.
and so now,
Gatlinburg's gonna want to have any money back.
yeah, they did, they did. And
Well, yeah, that's true,
they
pretty
split
much,
it
yeah.
and-
Yeah, Pigeon Forge
and
didn't have any.
And now Matthew, as I see Matthew's photo back here, and he's doing that job now, doing a terrific job, so. The Gatlinburg Golf Course in Pigeon Forge
In Pigeon Forge, yeah.
is a great place.
Where Cotton Berrier was the pro.
Right.
Harry Cotton Berrier.
Harry Cotton Berrier.
Yeah, you're talking about coming out of the 60s, right into the 70s. Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, for better known, was just a wide place in the road to get to Gatlinburg. And people pass through Sevierville too, so Sevierville or Pigeon Forge back in was just in its infancy of coming into tourism,
Right.
attractions and things, you know. But most people were going past us to get to Gatlinburg. And the early 70s, coming out of the 60s into the 70s was a big transition for all of us.
Yeah, it was.
Because we graduated from grammar school.
That's right. And went to,
And back then, we didn't get no cap and gown, did we?
no, we didn't. We had a
We
little
had a
ceremony.
banquet.
We had a little banquet.
Had a banquet at the S&W
In
cafeteria and all.
Knoxville. Yes, we did.
So, yeah,
It's a big deal.
I mean, it was a big transition for all of us, going from grammar school to high school.
Yeah.
And
And Pigeon
and
Forge
too,
didn't
most of
have
you
high
all
school.
will realize, back in those days, that every family was a one-car family. Everybody in the house didn't have a car back then, with no cell phone. Us kids had bicycles.
Wasn't no
Three
Uber
channels
either.
on
We
TV.
didn't have Uber, yeah.
Yeah, Bonanza and
Yeah.
Henry Aldridge or something like
Yeah.
that was on TV.
Yeah.
That S&W in Knoxville was, you really shoot yourself in there.
Oh, yeah,
But that's what we did, and there was only, I counted up the other night, there was only 43 students in our little class that year. Randy's a year behind us, but in '69 that went on to Sevier County High School.
But then most of our friends went to Sevier County.
That's true. That's true.
And there wasn't a high school in Pigeon Forge.
No.
GP was open, but all our friends in Gatlinburg came down through the tunnel.
We had a lot
Those that were
of-
above the tunnel came down that year. Now it's all changed around.
Well, too, back then, with Pigeon, was the only 2 high schools, I mean, Seymour built
Well,
it.
Seymour, yeah, Seymour and
But
Harrison. Jill
anyway,
Howard.
here,
Yeah.
Gatlinburg and Sevierville, since Pigeon Forge didn't have no high school, there was always a big rivalry, especially in the sports. And,
Oh, yeah.
and there was always a big rivalry between Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg. But most everybody, I'd say better than 2/3 of the students from Pigeon Forge went to Sevier County.
Sevier County High School. In our little class, I remember Sandy Price went to GP.
Right.
Roger Ogle did, and
Bob
Bob
Reagan.
Reagan went to GP.
Yeah, they was a
But that
few
was- that
lived
was
up that
it.
way.
Yeah, lived
wanted
up
to
that
go.
way, or had, but none of the rest of us did. But we had great high school years, started in the fall of 1969. I had a great high school homeroom teacher. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. And but we enjoyed our.
Still watches over you.
He still looks
He
over
still
us.
keeps an eye out on us, and as he says, he came in with us and went out with us. He started there in 1969 when we did, and in the fall or spring, I should say, of 1973, he got elected city manager or recorder. City recorder and later become city manager, and got out of it, and eventually got in the insurance business. But Mr. Hewlett Cheney was a great teacher.
I was your driver education teacher, and y'all scared me to death.
I know. I'm sure we did. I know that one poor little girl froze up that time. It scared us all that day. We thought we were all going to die that day. But yeah, driver's education, that's pretty brave to do that. But and we've lost 3 of our most influential teachers down there. Miss Julia Householder just recently, Miss Emma Ashley a few years ago, and who else? Norma Blair. And we've lost all of them. Norma was 101 when she died. Miss Julia was 98. I don't know how old Miss Ashley
She's
was.
100.
Was she 100? They must have been doing something right. I don't know what, but they were wonderful high school teachers, and they were a big part of our young adult life, and Mr. Hewlett was too, to kind of keep us on the straight and narrow, and pretty good, and he stayed in touch with us over the years, and we're glad to still have you with us, and we hope you live to be that old too. You're the last one going. We're glad.
Well, Hewlett tried to coach me a little bit in football when I was in high school.
How'd that work out?
Huh?
How'd that work out?
He tried, but he said, Bill, you'd be better off over warming the bank.
Somebody had to do it.
Well, at least you didn't get hurt.
No, that's pretty safe in there.
But there were a lot of other changes in. Like we said, Burger King was the first chain that came in. Arby's came in the next year in 1974. The Morton family had it forever here in Pigeon Forge, and now it's owned by Arby's International. And they tore it down, built it back there a few years ago and everything, and so it's more of a corporate thing now. But what other, we talked about Remax before. That was a biggie. If you don't know where it was at, it was a drive-in restaurant on the south end of town, down Randy's neck of the woods.
There's
Right-
down where the,
Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel is now, yeah.
and then we had
Drive-in theater right behind
On the
it.
side, of the Midway, right
And
beside.
for $1 on Wednesday, you
Yeah.
could take as many as you could get in your
Yeah.
car.
No, never did pay. I don't know if I ever paid.
You were always sitting in the trunk. Yeah, we did those things too, in the trunk. We used to we lived up on the hill across from the golf course, and you could see the big screen. And Mom would say, "What are y'all doing out there?" I said, we're watching a movie.
Without sound.
Yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name that took up the ticket. His last name was Johnson.
Weber.
Was it Weber?
John Weber ran the
Anyway,
Midway.
as
Yeah.
long as 1 or 2 paid,
Yeah.
he wouldn't.
No, he wouldn't. They weren't too strict on
They wasn't too
counting
strict
heads.
on how many you had,
No,
drunk
if you told them you had 3, they'd pretty much take your word for it. You
Yeah.
know. But
My
other.
mama had a station wagon, so we could.
You get a lot in there, yeah.
Yeah.
They made all their profit off the concession stand. Hamburgers 50 cents and
Yeah.
Cokes was 25. They'd make 75 cents off of you in a drop of a hat.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, real quick. Other place, the big 3 were the Apple Tree Inn, the Green Valley Restaurant, and Trotter's Restaurant. They were here in Pigeon Forge. They made their claim to fame was the whole family style, which was 2 meats, 3 vegetables, dessert. You got a salad, you got a drink. You got coffee or tea if you wanted soft drink or anything. They charged you extra for it, or they did when I worked at the Apple Tree Inn. But those were the 3 biggies that were in here.
And they were place butlers.
Yes.
Farmhouse.
Farmhouse, yeah, the Apple Tree Inn did. The Apple Tree Inn is across the street here where that Red Rooster place is now, or whatever it's called. It was there. Trotters is down here on the Parkway where you'll find Denny's now. Denny's is there. And in the Green Valley is down on the south end of town, over on the left if you're going down that way. And it's a
Levi's.
Levi place
Yeah.
now, sells that. But they were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even into the 80s, they were all thriving restaurants. They were very popular with both locals and tourists as well. And
Because they had good food.
they had good food. They sure did. Yeah, they had great food. And it was reasonably priced, and it was hard to beat. Yeah. I worked there at the Apple Tree Inn one summer. My mother worked at the Green Valley for 4 or 5 years at one time, and so they were all thriving restaurants that really made a lot. Y'all remember Hearst Diner? Did you ever go in Hearst Diner? It's over here on the Parkway. Used to be the bank. That little sauce place is in there now. It sells sauces and everything. Minyard Hearst. He had a little diner in there. I was in there a lot and everything.
Their specialty was a fried honey bun.
Fried honey bun. Oh man.
Couldn't beat a fried honey bun, I'm telling you.
We didn't know about cholesterol then.
It didn't start till the 80s or 90s. No, there wasn't no such thing as
They had
cholesterol.
it back in the 70s.
It was good, and he could make a good milkshake too. Minyard could. Minyard Hearst run it, and he also drove a school bus. Too, part time, and did a little bit of things. And remember Dog Suds, which was up here. Where the Dollywood train is now, where the train is there on the Parkway, right, it was right in there. Right next to the city, yeah. Well, where the train was, yes, the train's not there no more. Yeah, but it was right there, and that was a good place to eat, yeah. And Food City was Newman's back then it became Super Dollar, and then it became Food City, and I guess probably sometime in the early 90s. No, Latham's was on down. Latham's was down.
Right there down here next to the big inn.
Latham, yes,
Yeah,
next to
big
where the big inn, yes,
Yeah.
Latham's was down there.
So we had 2 grocery stores.
Had 2 grocery stores. We were big time in where we had 2 grocery stores. And
And in a 4-way stop,
yeah,
right there at the old
yeah,
mill.
that's right, the old
I
mill.
remember when they put the flashing light up.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the first.
That was a biggie.
It was a big deal.
We got the lights that you see on the Parkway now. They put those up in the fall of 1973. I remember we were seniors in high school, and they had been working on them all year. And when we got back from our senior trip, and first I remember everybody was talking about it. Drive up through the Parkway, the lights are on. They're done. Drive up through there, the lights are on. So that was a big deal to do that. A lot of places were here in the 70s that were kind of holdovers, and some of them I came up with was Magic World, which had formerly been Wares Park, the zoo, became Magic World. Porpoise Island, I'm sure everybody remembers that. And I know Bill remembers Tommy Bartlett's because they was right in his backyard up there where he lived.
Well, I was gonna say that Tommy Bartlett and Ogle come in a little later.
In the early 80s.
Early
Ogles
80s.
came in
We had
the
Tommy
early
Bartlett,
80s.
Porpoise Island, Ogle's Water Park, the Mountain Ocean.
Mountain Ocean.
Mountain
Mountain Ocean is where the Red Roof Mall is now, if you're familiar with Pigeon Forge. That was Mountain Ocean.
But anyway, I think at one time Pigeon Forge had more water than Myrtle Beach.
And Tommy Bartlett's had a show and everything. There was, yeah. And
The only
They
time
had those water boggins too. You can't
they had the water boggin, it was on my list. Yeah, I thought about
Back then, there wasn't no water shortage, I'll tell you that.
No, there wasn't. We had plenty of water. And you, Harriet, were a lifeguard at Mountain Ocean, is that correct? Okay.
I worked at Mountain Ocean, I worked at the Gatlinburg Golf Course, I worked at
Did you know somebody that worked there, got you a job?
I was 14. Started working. Everybody worked at
Everybody
14.
worked. Everybody worked at 14. I did, yeah.
I went to work.
Yeah, you went to work.
Most of the places I worked in the summertime were water related. So,
See, the economy was better for them than it was for me. I was a little younger. I had to go to work at 10. My mom worked at Zoder's Motel in Gatlinburg, and she didn't have a babysitter, and she took me to work with her in summertime, and I become their little fat bellboy. White shirt, a bow tie, and I got to drive a golf cart. Best time of my life.
That's a pretty good deal, yeah.
And I'd take all them people to the room, and I'd tell them how to use the air conditioner, and that's about all they had. And they'd say, Randy, can you tell us that again? And of course, I'd tell them again. I thought they loved me. Well, they did love me, but they just wanted to hear that little fat boy talk. That country slang, boy.
I like the way you talk.
Yeah, I like the way you talk. And they'd give me a quarter or 50 cents. Lord, at the end of the day, I'd have about $2 in my pocket. Well, that'd get me a Coke and a pack of cigarettes. I was good to go. You know, the cigarette machines were everywhere. 50 cents, you put it in, and if you had any wild roots, you could comb your hair while looking in the mirror on the cigarette machine and buy any pack of cigarettes you wanted. They didn't care. It didn't care how old you was.
They didn't care.
Nah, it didn't matter. There's
No.
We had one that's when we put to the golf course, you could take your fist and get it like this. So we
I wish I'd known that.
And do you remember, I never was down there much, but Archie Campbell's Hee Haw Village, do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
It opened up in the late 70s. It was down that way. And I don't remember much about, well, obviously by the name, it was Hee Haw themed, you know, Hee Haw was a popular TV show at the time, but I never was there much. I don't remember too much about it. He performed there, he and his son Phil, and years later I got to know his son Phil Campbell. He worked with us here in Pigeon Forge and did some things for us. But that was and Bonnie Lou and Buster come to town. Bonnie Lou and Buster come to town, yeah, and that's how the music industry started here in Pigeon Forge, was through Bonnie Lou and Buster. They had a syndicated show that was on television. Bonnie Lou and Buster Moore were their names. And I remember my grandmother was so excited when they first moved to Pigeon Forge. They lived right up the street from her. She said, "You'll never guess who moved in the neighborhood." And I'm like, "Who, Mama?" And she said, "Bonnie Lou and Buster Moore." Said, "I saw Buster the other day. He was looking for his dog."
I think that building that they performed in still
It's still there.
The
Yeah,
little dolly dresses.
The little
Yeah.
dolly dresses,
Yes.
the same building that
right next to the Red Roof Mall. Yeah,
they
right
performed
next
in
to-
when they still.
They performed in there, and that's kind of how music theater and the music business got started here in Pigeon Forge. The hotel motel business was going. I tried to remember. Of course, the Norma Dan had been around since the '60s. It was one of the earliest ones that we had here in Pigeon Forge.
Danette's still running.
Danette, it's still it's still family
family-owned.
owned. Danette still runs it to this day. One of the few motels in Pigeon Forge that isn't corporate now. Most of them are corporate in one way or the other. And I remember the Mountain Skies opened in the late '60s up, well, on the south end of town, down in Jackie's neck of the woods. The Collier family. That's where the Colliers started. Really, that was their first business, and that's how they got in.
We didn't have no chain motels back then, did we?
We did not have any chain
I think all the
motels back then.
hotels
All of them were.
in the '70s were family owned. yeah.
Well, what about the Ramada Inn that the Maples is coming? It opened up in the '70s. I'm not sure, but the Ramada Inn was.
By and large, most of the motels in Pigeon
Were
Forge
privately
family
owned, and you had the Ovals had Best Western and Tony, which were
They
right
still
across the
do.
street. And still do, yeah, they still do. It's still privately owned. You know, Dwight and his family still, Dwight Oval and his family still own it, and we're there. Do y'all remember those two little places? One of them was called the Flower Garden Court. They were right next to the Methodist Church off the Parkway. There were two small little hotels in there. Flower Garden Court was ran by, I can't think of their name right now, but I do remember that one.
Wasn't the Alex, was it?
No.
That's right next to
It was the Morrisons, I believe. You remember Tom and Sally Morrison? They ran one
This
of
was
them.
called something else.
It was called something else. There were
It's
two
right
of
there
them.
at the
But
church.
there were two of them right there at the church that were right close together, and they were kind of small. That was during the '70s, but that was about it. This place here, which used to be a Holiday Inn, as many of you know, they opened up here in the early '80s. I'm going to guess and say about '81 or '82 or thereabouts. Because when we were kids, right up the hill here at Pigeon, this was all just empty.
Right.
And then they developed it, and it was Carlstown. They had a Carlstown Inn here in the 70s. It was part of the anchor here that they had, and they had the Big Bear restaurant, and they had some other little places. Dr. Shields had his dentist office in here and everything. They had a little store. So there were some things like that here they got built in the 70s. More, I think they started developing it about, I'm going to guess and say 71 or 72, and started opening all
When did
this up
Shoney's
again.
get?
When did
Yeah,
Shoney's
when
get here?
Shoney's.
I'm not sure when
It's right
Shoney's.
out the end of this.
Yeah, but that's not been there. That's Shoney's. That Shoney's used to be a gas station.
Okay.
Yeah, it used to be a
Fuel
gas
station.
station. Yeah,
Paul
yeah.
Sims at the gas station.
Now, I thought
Yeah,
Paul
yeah.
Sims had the one on the corner.
He did. He had both of
Down
them.
there.
He had that one down there as well, and then Joe Rudder, who was his son-in-law, eventually took that one over for him there. Yeah, where Shoney's is now, the one up this way on the middle part of town, used to be a gas station.
Dan Connor had a station up there, didn't he?
Dan Connor had a station up there about where the Stampede is now.
Yeah, there where the
About-
Stampede is.
Near the
Yeah.
Stampede. And at one time, Dan owned all that land there.
And they're Ronnie's Gulf.
Well, they still do, don't they? Yeah, they just
Ronnie
lease-
Gulf, yeah.
Yeah, Ronnie's Gulf. It was Ronnie and Roy's Gulf, and then Roy, whoever dropped out at some point, and Ronnie Stanley ran it.
Best hot dog in town.
Yeah, yeah. So it was still.
There was a place right there, Paul Sims, off of by the mill, right there at that corner of where Butch was. There was a little diner in there, and it was called Eat.
Eat.
It was right. Okay.
Weren't too creative, were they?
No, but I remember, you know.
Just directly to the point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Eat was the name of the little.
I remember. Well, they had the place across the street where the Raiders had a store, and it became different things. And then even behind it, Jim, what's his name, had a mechanic there. He worked on cars and everything there, even into the 70s. And most of River Road, where you see all those businesses now in River Road, people were still living there in houses then quite a bit. Even during the 70s, a lot of people lived on River Road.
I did.
You did, Jackie did, lived on the lower end of it down there, yeah.
Yeah. But
And,
most of the folks that went to work and lived on River Road went to our church. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was-
because it's so close, yeah.
It was close.
Just a hop and a skip.
But
Ronnie's Gulf station, I'll say something about it. He started the first automatic car wash in Pigeon Forge. You'd give him $1 and you could go in there and automatically wash your car with his hose and stuff. And he had chamois and the old wringer thing there. You wring that chamois out and dry your car off, give him $1. And we didn't have no tar blacker then. We had to buy a Coke out of the machine, the Coke, rub Coke on there and that'd black your tires. But I spent many $1 down there washing my car. Back in the day.
Back in the day.
First automatic, yeah.
Yeah. Was that your first car?
Yeah, the first car. I ain't never washed none since then.
It was, and things changed from 1970 to 76. Dollywood at that time was still Gold Rush Junction.
But
And in 1976, it became Silver Dollar City.
it was Rebel Railroad.
It was Rebel Railroad that
Started
started,
Railroad.
yes, when it started in 61.
That
it
was the
Rebel
most
Railroad.
fun because
It was.
They used to rob the train.
Right.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
ride the horses through there, and then they dress up, the crazy guys dress up like Indians and run through the train and scream and holler. It was really cool.
It was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Because
They
initially,
had just the log flume ride was all they had.
that was about it. They didn't have much.
Had its show in the
They had a show in the saloon, and in the early, they built the pool there, and the public could come. Did you work there as well? I remember that. And back then, especially in the early 70s, you could just drive in over there. you didn't have to pay to park. Now it's $20 to park, you know. But back then you could just drive in over there and you could park right next to the pool and go in and use all the facilities and everything. And it was still a lot smaller. It's nothing like what you see there now. Dolly really took it to the upteenth level when she came in and took it over. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
That's
to
where
do that.
we learned to drive in the Dollywood parking lot. Mom would take us over there in the wintertime, you know, when there was
Well, yeah, when it's closed,
so you
yeah.
drive all over,
Yeah.
and it was, and then we could go in and out without having trouble. But they had a huge campground.
They did. They had a huge campground. They did.
It
Yeah.
was-
Yep. That's right. I forgot about that. They had a big campground.
Yeah.
And so you did a lot of lifeguarding, didn't you? Yeah. Where'd you work at in the summer, Bill? We know where Randy is at.
My first job was washing dishes at Remax.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But that's a pretty good job. Wasn't
There
it?
wasn't no automatic
I thought everything
Didn't know-
Remax come in a paper tray.
You know,
I don't remember having any.
It's hard to pick a hamburger on paper.
Yeah, you could eat inside if you wanted.
Yeah,
to.
you
They
Oh,
did.
well, we wasn't allowed inside.
You wasn't allowed in there.
They
Okay.
had a
Yeah,
three
he's
bag
from,
thing.
he's from Conner Heights. I wasn't allowed to go to Conner Heights either.
No, we sort.
I
We
scared
had
those
to
boys up there.
stay in the car at the drive-in part. We couldn't get out. That's why I didn't ever see no plates, and I didn't know about the plates.
I probably told it before, probably told it last year, but the first job I ever had was I was a
Yeah.
busboy at Apple Tree and worked for them there. Summer '69. I just got out of 8th grade and hadn't started high school yet. And I
That's a
was-
song.
Summer '69. That is a song. That is a song.
Yeah,
So
Harriet just mentioned, Aunt Della just died recently.
recently, yes,
Yeah,
she
the
did.
own, she was,
Those of you who don't know the name, they came up with the name Remax because Mr. McCarter was the husband,
Right.
and his wife had been a Reagan, correct? And so they put the R.E. and the M.A.C. on it. So that's how they come. It was kind of a strange name. People wondered about it all the time. That's how they come up with the name Remax. Reagan was her maiden name, and then that was Bill McCarter. It was English McCarter's brother. Is that not right? Who owned it? Yeah.
and Doc Fox, that
Yeah.
run the curb,
Mm-hmm.
is still working today down at Lowe's.
Is that right?
90 years old.
90
Oh
years.
my God! Oh my
If you
God!
want to see somebody from Remax, you still work at Lowe's in Spearman.
Back at the lumber before you go out the back door. If you want a deal on lumber, just mention Remax and she'll give you a discount. Get you lumber cheap.
But the city changed a lot in the '70s, and we went to, like I say, went to a 5-person city council, and some of our city managers, of course, Dan Connor was the first one, and other ones, some of these I knew, others I did not. John Lane, James Asher, I knew him a little bit. T.C. Runyon, I knew Mr. Runyon. Then Don Scaff. Okay. And then when Don resigned, that's when Earlene took over in 1982. And of course, she's been our city manager ever since. Again, we talked about her earlier, but it's just incredible the changes that we saw. So a lot of those things started in the '70s that we see now, that we see now come to fruition. Of course, the oldest building in Pigeon Forge is still the old mill. The old mill built in 1830. You know, and
Please enjoy the food.
yeah. All right, no commercials now. But and really that section, the old mill section of town, Sevierville has a downtown area, and Gatlinburg is a walking city. You know, everybody walks in Gatlinburg and all that. That's really, I guess, Pigeon Forge's downtown area. It's where it was so much of the city took place in that part there and everything. And it's changed so much over the years. When we were kids, where Patriot Park is, they used to have hay over there. I remember people would
cornfields.
cut that.
We lived
Yeah.
behind the pottery in that little section,
Yeah.
and it was a new little subdivision when we moved. And I remember my mother telling us that they found that little house where we lived. And said they paid $9,000 for
Oh, wow.
it. And that was, she said she thought she was going to lose her shirt, you know, but it worked out pretty
It worked
good.
out pretty good, didn't it? Yeah, they did all right. But that area has changed a lot, even in our time.
And now they're redoing a lot of it, and I think it's
Yeah.
wonderful because
I do too.
it
I do
looks so
too.
much better
Yes.
than it did for a while.
Yeah.
But it's down there behind the old mill. We used to ride our bicycles. We used to go to the Ferguson's. Did you ever go to
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
pottery?
Yeah.
Did you ever go
Yeah.
to the house?
yeah. It's
Yeah.
where
Where the restaurant is.
restaurant, isn't it? Well,
That's
it's
We
where
used to go
the
roller
Pottery
skate.
House restaurant.
We'd roller skate in the living room on the slate floor. The slate floor is still there. But there were like 4 or 5 sets of sisters in that one little neighborhood. We didn't have any boys but the
Yeah.
Harper
Yeah.
boys. You know, we had the Harper boys, but that
They didn't count.
no,
It's
no.
pretty mean.
But we had about 5 sets of sisters, and we're all about the same
Yeah.
age. So
Yeah.
it was, but down where the Food City is, the new one, that was cornfields.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
just thick. And they,
I remember Leroy Maples built the first motel down there, wasn't he? In some little cornfields down there on the right. And he was one of the first motels.
Well, there was little
that's-
cabins down below me that
Yeah.
they had, and then the
Yeah.
Colliers had it after them
Right.
on River Road.
Pigeon River Court.
Pigeon
Yeah.
I
River
remember
Court.
Pigeon River Court,
We
which is
used
there.
to go down,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he would have, he'd bring his projector home from school. And the screen and set up a movie out around the swimming pool, and so he
I
would.
went to some of that, I did some of that.
Yeah, but he would bring his projector, you know, those great big ones that you had at school, and hook it up and
Yeah.
out by the pool, and his guests could. So we'd all go down there and pop popcorn
Yeah,
and have a good time.
we
Just
had a
down
skating
from,
rink too.
down
Yeah.
from the
And
skating
skating
rink.
rink.
I
Yeah,
still wish
skating
we had a
rink.
skating rink.
Skating rink was originally a bowling alley when it first opened up.
But the Dan Blaylock was always
Yeah.
in there, and
So-
I did not know he was a teacher. My first day in high school, I go walking in and I find that Dan Blaylock treated me like I was his kid. I'd go into the bowling alley and he'd set the lanes up for me. He'd find a ball for me. He'd make me a grape and set it down there. What else do you need, honey? You know, and I'd go bowl. And I just thought he was just a really nice man that worked at the bowling alley. And I went into algebra.
You didn't know
and
he
he's
taught
standing
algebra,
there
did
and
you?
just smiled at me and said, "Have a seat, Miss Barnes." I was like, "Oh my God, I found you."
So if you go to the Pottery House restaurant and eat, that is where the Ferguson family, who owned the Pigeon Forge pottery and all that over there,
Yeah.
where the restaurant is now, that's where they lived. So,
Pottery house.
yeah, where the Pottery House
Pottery
is,
House.
yeah, which is across the street from the old mill restaurant. But, yeah,
When I was just a
yeah.
kid, the river froze, and this has never happened since then I can remember. And Jane Ferguson was one of the only few people in town had a pair of ice skates. We didn't ice skate; it just wasn't something we done. And they got out there and skated on that river up above
The old mill.
The old mill.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, she was in the newspaper.
everybody went down there and watched her. It's just like a real TV. I mean, you know, I forgot now, except we're sitting there watching it. It's just unbelievable.
She's about the only ice skate queen we had.
Yeah, she was there. So anything she done, we just she's the best.
She could do the sword dance, you know, like in
We're
Scotland too.
we're getting a little tight on our time, so we could go on like this forever. We will if we have to. But do any of you all want to ask us any questions or anything? Oh, Mita, yes.
I know none of you got into trouble, but you know people who did. What did kids get to do when they got in trouble in Pigeon Forge? Did they ever get picked up to go to jail or?
Now, mostly they tried to talk their way out of
They
it.
tried to talk away. It was mostly fireworks. They would get us with fireworks a lot of time. And I remember they caught 4 or 5 of us one time. And all they had really done to us was they took our fireworks away from us. But Brent Collier was one of them. His dad at that time was the chief of police. And the officer that was talking to us, he said, "All right, boys, he said, I'm gonna let you go, I'm gonna take all these fireworks, I'm gonna let you go. And he said, I'm not gonna take you to jail, but I'm gonna talk to all your parents. And Brent said, could you not just take us to jail? So I remember getting in trouble a lot with fireworks around Halloween. They would do that.
Or egging this householder's house.
Well, we TP'd it. We didn't egg it. We didn't
They
egg it.
came by while me and Cynthia Wise were TPing her
Yeah.
house. Nobody
Yeah.
had got their house that year at Halloween, and she kept talking about it, and I just looked at Cynthia and
So
said,
it
can
was
you
awful.
spend the night at my house tomorrow night? Yeah, so we went and did it, and the police come by, and we just waved.
You gotta remember
Yeah.
back then, they only had like 2 police officers in Pigeon Forge in the late 60s, early 70s. Jack Baldwin, who used to be our chief of police here, told me that his 1976-77 budget was $68,000 for the entire police department, and that was him, 3 other full-time police officers, and 1 part-time. So that's all they had then, you know. It was still such a small town that, you know, they just, and now, you know, oh my goodness, that's $68,000 and nothing. But that's even in the 70s, it was still real small and real quiet, you know. But I think that was this mischievous stuff, yeah. TPing houses or stuff or fireworks.
We used to
or
hang out
stuff.
on the bridge down there at the old mill.
Yeah,
Remember Jack
that
Maples fell off of it?
Jack Maples fell off of it and got hurt. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he was trying to.
So but I think it was just mostly mischievous stuff. You know, you hear these stories about back before where they would,
Outhouse on the old mill,
yeah, or they would assemble
set fire.
bikes and stuff on the old mill bridge and do things like that. And I remember during the elections, they would often, the losers, they would have little mock burials, you know, they would have it out on the parkway.
On the parkway.
So-and-so lost and everything. Yes, sir.
Yes, there's a mural about the incident, I think, at the firehouse subs on the wall. Is that a true story?
Is it, David?
It's true.
Okay, it's true.
That's where they had that. On the bridge, the burns. Outhouse sitting on the
Oh,
bridge.
yes, now how said, yes, now,
Yes.
okay, I know
Yeah,
what
they
you're
did
talking
that.
about
That was
now.
Ronnie
Yes, that
Whaley,
is true.
Denny, and them.
That is true.
That's true.
That's Ronnie Whaley, who was in on it, who ironically went on to become a police officer.
Yeah, he was.
Yes.
That was his punishment. He
That
had
was
to
his
come to
punishment, yeah. Yes, that is true. I believe that is true. Yes, you had a question, sir?
Was there a tornado that came through here early 70s and knocked the Porpoise Island? It was it looked like a pizza hut top down.
Yeah, I remember they had a real strange sign that said, I don't remember.
I don't think a
you know,
tornado,
I don't
they had
remember
water,
that.
wind, but I don't think it
Yeah.
was a tornado.
And Porpoise Island's on the river down there where it's all the island now, you know, and all that there. They had a little show, and they had live porpoises there, you know. I always heard that it flooded one time, and some of the porpoises got out and got into the stream, you know, and everything. And but yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to know more about that motorboat ski place that they had behind.
Oh, Tommy Bartlett's
Tommy Bartlett.
Water
Yeah.
Circus.
It was. He's
What year
from
was that?
The Dales in Wisconsin. The
It opened
Wisconsin
up.
Dales.
Yeah.
They had a big one up there.
And they had one in
Yeah.
Florida. They had one in Florida. It opened up in the about 1978, 77, 78, and made it till about the early 80s, thereabouts. And they had a show. They had a
It ran for about 8 years.
yeah.
Yeah, the water ski thing behind
Right,
behind Wood Grill.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So
You
that
go
was
up Sugar Harbor
70
Road.
Up there by
78 to
Buffalo.
80. Yeah.
Thereabouts.
You'll,
Well, maybe a little longer than that. Bill said
You'll
they
go
were
up there and
there.
look, so you can, the whole,
Oh yeah,
Oh,
still
still
there.
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 You can tell that
they had jumps and they had to be 3 or 4 skiing together and standing on their shoulders. It's the only pond I ever seen a motorboat in my life.
Well, now too,
It wasn't no bigger than a pond. I mean, it's just a big pond.
they had their closing act was a helicopter trapeze act. Dave Merrifield done the trapeze on the helicopter. That was their closing act.
Huh.
And we could see it from our car.
Yeah, Bill lived right across the street from
But
it.
anyway, there was one time he fell and fell in that lake.
And the helicopter used to take off right behind Remax. That's where the helicopter ride was. And it was a bubble one like on the MASH, and he could haul 2 people with him. That's it, him and 2 people, and you do your helicopter ride and you go up, maybe jump in the pond, I don't know.
But I worked at the water circus.
We might have time for one more question
A very
or
short time.
comment or from anybody. Yes.
Because they wanted me to sell high price tickets.
Spout, that was his nickname, but he had an encounter with an elephant.
A gentleman named what?
Spout.
Spout, and he had, well, I don't know if that is true. Now, we always heard, and this happened sometime in the 60s, that Fort Ware, that the elephant got loose there one day.
Yeah.
I thought more than the elephant got.
Well,
More than
there were
that, yeah.
one time they
It had
claimed the
something wrong.
elephant did, and then there was another, something got,
It's a chimpanzee or a gorilla.
chimpanzee or a chimp or something got
Because
loose.
We had to get under our desk, I was in the ground.
Yeah, they had to close all the
I mean,
windows.
They told us.
Chimpanzee out, get under your desk.
They told us that at school. That would have been in the 60s, but I do remember it was all over town that the elephant was just running wild and destroying people and doing everything. But I don't think it was that bad. I think they recaptured it pretty soon.
Yeah, we actually have one photograph of that in our archives at the library of the elephant
Oh my
out.
goodness.
And it's about, in the photo, you know, you get a little photo, so it's like this big, but it's a cross in a field.
Yeah.
Because that's what Pigeon
Yeah.
Forge was on that side
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they said they recaptured it. It was heading for the river. And they recaptured the elephant over there by the river.
We
But the,
lived across over.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They was gonna film a Tarzan movie if it made it to the river.
That is true. That really did
Yeah.
happen. That the
Connie
elephant
Flevinger's
got
house
out.
one morning. I'd spent the night over there, and it was in the front yard, and her mama said, "Boys, go over there and tell them their elephant's out again."
If you leave here and go to Irwin, Tennessee, they hung an elephant up there. Now, that's a true story.
That's true.
I ain't got time to tell it, but it really happened.
And they took us there from Pigeon Forge Elementary, especially when it was Fort Ware,
Yeah.
all the time for school trips and did that. So that's a little bit. I guess our time is up. We thank you all so much for coming. We'll try and come up with something good for next year and see what we can tell you about Pigeon Forge. We might go up into the 80s, or we might do something a little bit different. And I'm working on a history of wilderness wildlife that I might do here on my own one time to kind of tell people. I've been toying around with it for years. I don't know if I'll do it or not, but I might or might not. But I want to thank Harriet and Bill and Randy and Jackie, my dear, dear friends who I love very much. Thank you all for coming out here today to play with us. And thank my wife, Mary Ann, for allowing me to come out and play with you all. And I've been here all week.